Olympic sport and contaminated food. I take performance-enhancing drugs for sport, caffeine in coffee mostly. It enhances my performance and helps me stay focused so I make good tactical decisions during races in my chosen sport of windsurfing. It started in 2010 when I competed in a regatta sponsored by a coffee company. Unlimited free coffee for competitors right at the water's edge. Oh, the joy! I drank a lot of coffee during that event and I won a lot of races. To this day, I make sure I'm properly caffeinated when competing in an important regatta. Drug tests are not a thing at the events I attend, although if they were, I would pass the tests, the allowed limit for caffeine being higher than anyone could comfortably ingest by drinking coffee. Performance-enhancing drugs can be found in other foods too, but unlike caffeine in coffee, their presence is often unexpected, proving an unwelcome surprise for many elite athletes. For example, at the 2011 Under-17 Soccer World Cup in Mexico, more than 100 athletes tested positive for the banned substance clenbuterol, which promotes muscle growth. The source of the clenbuterol was restaurant food, with 30% of meat samples from the restaurants catering the event containing the substance, and 52% of people in the non-athlete control group also testing positive. The clenbuterol was in the meat because it was used illegally by beef growers in Mexico, with around 1/4 of slaughterhouses in 2015 suspended after livestock was found to contain clenbuterol. It's not just clenbuterol. Another Mexican athlete and Olympic medalist race walker, Maria Guadalupe Gonzalez, blamed meat containing trenbolone, an anabolic steroid and banned substance, for a failed drug test 2 years after she won silver. Like clenbuterol, trenbolone is used as a veterinary drug in beef cattle in Mexico. The banned steroid nandrolone can also be found in meat, with American record-winning runner Shelby Houlihan testing positive after eating a burrito, which her lawyers say may have contained meat from an uncastrated boar. Such meat can naturally contain nandrolone. I'm just a weekend athlete, but for elite athletes, the dangers of a positive test from contaminated food are real and ever-present. Drug tests are ultra-sensitive and can detect amounts at the parts per billion level, much lower than the level needed to enhance performance. Detection of even trace amounts can lead to disciplinary actions, such as long bans from competition. Performance-enhancing drugs can be present in food through accidental contamination, intentional addition, or because they or their precursors are naturally present, like nandrolone in wild boar meat, or the morphine compounds naturally present in poppy seeds that caused a boxer to fail a drug test after eating 5 poppy seed bagels per day for weeks. Intentionally added substances include clenbuterol, trenbolone and zeranol in beef meat, and metanolone in poultry meat, which are used as veterinary drugs to treat meat animals and can remain as residues in the food. Veal liver containing clenbuterol caused illnesses in 22 patients in France in 1991, with symptoms including tremors, headaches, tachycardia and dizziness. Similar outbreaks occurred in Spain and Portugal in the 1990s and 2000s. Naturally occurring banned substances can be found in poppy seed containing foods, which can cause high urinary concentrations of morphine and codeine in people who have eaten 2 to 3 poppy seed bread rolls. Herbal coca tea, if consumed in the hours before a drug test, could give a positive result for cocaine. Spices, including Szechuan pepper, black pepper and cinnamon, contain the banned substance higenamine. Cereal foods can contain the naturally occurring substance zeranol, a metabolite of the mycotoxin zearalenone produced by fusarium fungi on spoiled cereals. Zeranol is a non-steroidal anabolic agent banned in sport and animal production. It could be ingested by athletes in mold-contaminated cereals. Under anti-doping rules, athletes are responsible for whatever is in their body regardless of how it got there. Athletes are warned by governing bodies about the dangers of ingesting foods and supplements that could contain intentionally added or naturally occurring banned substances. For example, Chinese officials warned athletes about Chinese meat containing prohibited substances before the Beijing Olympics in 2008, and the United States Olympic team took its own food to Beijing to mitigate the risks. At the Rio Olympics in 2016, caterers guaranteed that all food in the Olympic Village would be carefully vetted to ensure it did not contain any prohibited substances, and athletes were not allowed to take outside food into the village, while the Canadian team were told to only eat food they brought from home when travelling to Rio to avoid any mishaps. If an athlete does consume contaminated food, they may be exonerated if they can show officials that they ingested the prohibited substance unintentionally. They must provide evidence showing how the accidental ingestion occurred. However, such a defence doesn't always work. For example, the Court of Arbitration for Sport upheld the ban on the American runner who ate the nandrolone-containing burrito, despite evidence showing the substance can be found in some meats. Similarly, a Tour de France winning cyclist, Alberto Contador, had his suspension upheld even though he had successfully traced a piece of meat he claimed was the reason for his clenbuterol positive test to a farmer whose brother had been convicted for illegally using clenbuterol in meat production. One athlete who did manage to avoid sanction was the Swiss man who returned a positive test for the diuretic HCTZ, which turned out to be present as an impurity in the coating of ibuprofen tablets he had taken before competing. Investigators obtained retention samples from the tablet manufacturer and performed tests using placebo tablets spiked with the substance to confirm that the levels found in the ibuprofen tablets could result in a positive urine test. The Paris Olympics have just finished, and a cloud hangs over the relationship between major competing nations China, the United States, and the World Anti-Doping Agency, WADA, which I'm going to call WADA, due to the contaminated food defence used by some athletes prior to this and the previous Summer Olympics in Tokyo. WADA has announced it's concerned about the tainted food defence and has launched an investigation into the prevalence of a performance-enhancing substance in meat in certain countries. Although it's the designated world authority on anti-doping, WADA is not responsible for testing or policing drug use and doping. The responsibility lies with each country and international sports bodies. WADA's role is as a backstop, only stepping in when countries fail to properly police their athletes. A key element in the 2024 controversy is related to a decision by the China Anti-Doping Agency to clear 4 members of the Paris Olympics China team, 2 swimmers, a shooter and a BMX rider, of any wrongdoing after they tested positive for the banned steroid metandionone in early 2023. The agency said the positive results were for contaminated food and that it had discovered metandionone in dozens of meat samples in China. WADA commenced an investigation into metandionone in meat in early 2024. The metandionone incidents follow a larger food contamination incident with the Chinese swimming team before the Tokyo Olympics in 2021. During that incident, 23 members of the Chinese swimming team were cleared of wrongdoing after testing positive for the banned substance trimetazidine, TMZ. The detections were blamed on contaminated food served at a hotel where the 23 were staying for a training camp. The China Anti-Doping Agency determined the positive results were due to environmental contamination, and this was accepted by the international governing body for swimming, World Aquatics. WADA didn't investigate the incident at the time due to COVID-19 restrictions. However, when the incident became public in April 2024, they said they'd carefully reviewed the evidence and stood by the decisions made and the processes followed. There is an established history of veterinary drugs being found in Chinese meat. For example, researchers found detectable levels of clenbuterol in the urine of volunteers who had returned to Germany after being in China, with the substance found in 79% of volunteers' urine samples compared to a control group with no detections. The substance that affected the 23 swimmers in 2021 is, however, not a veterinary medicine, but a human drug with no history of food contamination. TMZ is a drug used to treat heart disease in humans. It enhances athletic performance by helping with physical endurance. After the 23 athletes tested positive for TMZ, investigators from the China Anti-Doping Agency found traces of TMZ in the hotel kitchen, in the extractor fan, spice containers, and the drain. Now, how did a medication for humans with a heart condition get spread all over a hotel kitchen? Olivia Rabin, Senior Director of Science and Medicine at WADA, told reporters that the contamination was possibly caused by a kitchen worker who was using the drug and contaminated the kitchen areas. And I'm going to quote from Professor Rabin here. The fact that the spice containers were found with traces of trimetazidine in the kitchen as well is not incompatible with somebody using trimetazidine on site who could have contaminated those elements. I'm wondering how many doses of TMZ a kitchen worker would have had to handle during their shift for it to be found in an extractor fan and a drain. A lawyer for WADA said the Chinese investigators who made the initial finding didn't hypothesize about how the contamination occurred in their report and didn't come up with, and I quote, anything concrete when interviewed by WADA. WADA maintains they had no evidence and could not have got any at the time of the incident to disprove the contamination theory. As such, they would not have been able to overturn the Chinese agency's decision. Furthermore, both the Chinese Anti-Doping Agency and WADA agree that the levels of TMZ found in the athletes were too low to convey performance-enhancing effects. In short, Olympic athletes and anti-doping agencies are grappling with issues caused by food contaminated with performance-enhancing substances. Some countries have failed to ban athletes who tested positive for banned substances by claiming they unintentionally ingested the substances in food. The international sports community questions whether such decisions have been made fairly by national agencies and umpired correctly by the International Anti-Doping Agency. And as always, you will find all the sources for everything that I've said linked in the email and the post.